In Our Town is presented by the Springfield Daily Citizen. We believe good journalism brings the issues to light, but great journalism brings communities together. Visit us online for in-depth local journalism and more at sgfcitizen.org.
This is In Our Town, and I'm your host, Tom Carlson. Today, my guest is Christina Ford. Christina is the wife and partner of Coach Dana Ford, Missouri State basketball coach. Christina and Dana are founders of the Rebound Foundation, a local not-for-profit helping victims of domestic abuse. Christina, welcome to In Our Town.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The Rebound Foundation probably has meaning at different levels. I know there's a fundraiser that you and your husband Dana put on, but also it speaks to domestic violence. And tell us a little bit about your background and what led to the creation of the Rebound Foundation.
Yes, so it's pretty much one of those stories where I experienced domestic violence early on in my life. And as a child, I didn't know what was going on, but I knew that violence was a part of relationships that I witnessed. And unfortunately, it led me to normalize those behaviors and made me understand that that's just what happens in relationships, that when you have disagreements or somebody's upset, then violence occurs. And
that's just normal, right?
Yeah, that's just normal. That's just what happens. And I really didn't think anything else of it because I didn't see, I had friends and things, but I just thought that's just okay, that it's okay if a partner uses either physical force or puts you down. Led me to be in an abusive relationship early on. Thankfully, that ended and I was safe and okay. As I understand it, that's unfortunately not the case for some people that I actually went to high school with and were actually in those abusive relationships. It ended in murder, unfortunately. So thankfully I was able.
Goodness.
Yes, I know. It's so sad to think about that. Girls that I went to high school with, lives were ended from violence. And so it really hit home for me.
And you're not originally from Springfield, you're from the Chicago area, am I correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so you experienced that, and then tell us how you reacted to it and changed your life, saw domestic violence, the social ill that it is. Develop that a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
Yep, of course. So once I got out of that relationship, it's almost like a light bulb went off, and I realized this is not okay, that this is not okay, that this is actually should not be happening. And from there, thankfully, I never looked back. And so I was able to realize what I experienced and never want that again. I'm like, that's not okay. And so it really challenged me to look into what I had to do within myself.
Well, stop there for a second.
Yes.
What you had to do with it yourself. Are you suggesting that in some way you contributed it or enabled that kind of activity?
No, not necessarily. Just it allowed me to educate myself. So
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so it allowed me to realize what I witnessed as a child and process that and understand that that is not how relationships work. And so then when you're in an abusive relationship, it's almost like I said, you're programmed, that's what you're used to. And it could be scary, as crazy as that sounds. It could be scary to get out of that and then experience a healthy relationship because that's just not normal to you. Mm-hmm. And so I really had to, once I found who is now my husband, he was a very healthy person. And originally that scared me because I was not used to a very healthy person. And so I really had to reprogram my brain to say, this is actually what is normal. This is good. This is healthy. And as crazy as that might sound, sometimes when you are used to abuse, you kind of have to take a step back and say, okay, like this is actually what you should be experiencing.
Both you and Dana, I have done some research, of course, before interviewing you today, and both of you are fervent Christians, and faith is at the center of your lives. Was that always the case for you?
For me, I grew up in church, but you grow up in church, and for me, I knew about God and the relationship, but then I didn't have my own relationship, but thankfully my parents knew that was important. So it wasn't until I became a teenager that I actually accepted Christ into my life and started to be in my own relationship with him. Mm-hmm. And that actually helped as well. That kind of helped for me when you feel that love from Jesus, then it kind of helps you to realize the love of Christ and to go after more, and that he wants us to live a life abundantly and what that looks like. And so that definitely helped. But as a new Christian, that when I accepted Christ myself, you kind of have to learn that. It's just not like, an instant. So I learned that, and that's who Dana was as well at the time. And so that really helped us to build that foundation from the very beginning, that we were both believers and were able to bring that faith into our relationship.
So you brought a lot to the party in terms of personal experience when you decided to found the Rebound Foundation. As I understand it, that first chapter, you might say, was in Chicago. Is that right?
Yes.
And
so
how did that get going?
Yeah, so that was, again, just from my faith, I really felt as though like God was leading us to provide homes for people that have experienced domestic violence. I had a dream and I saw these people in a home, and was like, okay. So I called my mother the next day, and long story short, she had something similar happen that day about a home. And so we just it was a faith walk from there of, okay, God, what do you want us to do with this? And
okay.
Through that walk, it became very apparent that we were to provide homes for people who had suffered or experienced domestic violence.
Did you just make it up as you go along, or were there some models that you looked at to try your own version of this? How did that work?
I did. So we lived in Illinois at the time when this vision came about. We quickly moved to Nashville. As you know, in coaching, you could be here 1 minute and then you're there the next minute. So we were in Illinois, and at the time we moved to Nashville, and that's really where I built the foundation. That's when we became a nonprofit, a 501c3. That's where I started just diving deep into other models of transitional homes. So I started looking into ones in New York and how they were able to start. Then I started visiting shelters and meeting with their executive director, because everybody has a story. Everybody did not start off in some large building or a large nonprofit. Maybe some do, but I really wanted to hear how everyone started. Where did you start from? And so I started to hear the stories of, we started in this home and then we moved to this location. And so I started just visiting with anybody who would meet with me of, how do I do this? How do I get started?
So tell us about that first chapter. I'm trying to think if there's a better word for it, but the first place where you are actually providing services.
So that was actually here in Springfield, believe it or not. I never imagined. So the really beginning foundation years were me educating myself, creating a plan, fundraising, coming up with the funding. So it felt like forever. It felt like nothing was happening, but hindsight is great. And so I realized that that's probably why we're able to continue forward today, because the foundation was laid properly, and it was years in the making before we actually began to service people. It wasn't like, hey, there's a vision and let's just go for it. No, it took a few years to kind of lay the foundation and groundwork. And we moved here to Springfield, and it was really fast to where I started meeting with people here in the community, because again, we are servants. We want to serve in whatever way God has for us. And so I started meeting with people, and I met with someone, and they're like, I think that I can help you with these homes. And so immediately we opened up our first home. I think maybe that November that first year we got here, and then we opened up our second home a few months later. And so here was where we first started to service individuals in our homes.
Clearly, you're a woman who's got confidence, is willing to take things on, but was that kind of scary, doing stuff that maybe you hadn't done before and just jumping in and figuring it out as you go forward?
I think if I didn't have those years of building and meeting with people, and I went back to school to get my certification in domestic violence advocacy, because I really wanted to understand from the advocate side what people are experiencing, not just as a victim, but how can I help them? So I think that because I gained the education, the background, the experience, met with those people, it wasn't as scary, because this is the moment that I was waiting for. I was just waiting for that moment to finally be like, okay, like we've raised these funds, and I can actually tell our donors and the people that have supported us for these years, we're here. We finally have made it. So it was actually exciting and scary at the same time, because I had just gotten here. I just had a baby. The husband just took a new position. So looking back, it's like, I don't know how that all worked out. I mean, I had the baby, and we were picking out furniture for the house, and it was madness. I mean, it was madness, but I was so excited.
if you wouldn't screw off between midnight and 6 in the morning, you'd get all this done.
See, I know, exactly. Yep, you're right. You are right. I'll take it. I'll take that. Yes, so I was excited.
That's great.
Yeah, we were ready.
Well, so as I understand it, a friend of mine, Lori Wanamaker, who was on the board at Harmony House, said about you, she'll always pick up the phone and help you out. I know there's a relationship with the Rebound Foundation and Harmony House, and why don't you tell our listeners how that works?
Yes, so that was early on. I met with Lisa Farmer when I got here because I was told, this is the domestic violence shelter that's here. And originally I knew that I wanted to help, the domestic violence shelter here because I knew that I was going to do transitional housing, which is different than shelter, but it's the second layer. So, a person is an emergency shelter and then they come to us. So I met with her early on and kind of told her what our vision was, but I did not think that our homes were coming that fast. We didn't have homes at that time. And so I just really wanted to plug in with her to see how can I assist, how can I help, and how can I come in. And so we met early on and I told her about my vision. And at the time, I think they were not in their building for too long. That was a new building. So I was able to tour there and have an understanding of what they do. And then quickly our homes came about. And so I met with her again and said, hey, change of plans a little bit. Now we're actually going to start our homes here in Springfield. And we partner early on. She was very willing and ready to say, yes, we will absolutely partner. And we built a relationship. And so we have a referral process where if they have women and children who are in shelter and need transitional housing for whatever reason, maybe they don't have the funding or the resources to leave shelter and go into a safe place, or they just need more time. They're not ready to be independent on their own.
Well, there are exceptions, but as I understand it, more or less a 3-month stay at Harmony House, and if there's not an exception, then you're kind of expected to move to the next level. Is that
Yes.
right? How that
Yes.
works? And tell us about what, say, a mother with 2 kids, you help her. Tell us about what her life looks like once she leaves Harmony House.
Yeah, so if she's coming to us, like I said, we partner with them. We have an interview process, and so they fill out an application. We interview them just to make sure they're a good fit because it can be a scary transition. They're going from emergency shelter where they have case managers right on site to where we are that in between. We are there to support you, but we don't live in the homes with them. And so we really want to make sure that who we're taking in is actually ready for that. They're ready for that little bit of independency, but they're also that we're going to support them along the way. And so we really want to make sure that we're bringing someone in who is ready for that. So we interview them. If it works out, great. Mom and children or the single woman, whoever that is, they move into our homes. And then we pair them with an advocate. So we just walk alongside them and, really ask them what is it that they need during this stay. And we help them to try to budget for the next step because they're with us for 6 months to a year. I mean, we give extensions if the 6 months comes up and they're just not ready. But we really want to make sure when they leave us, they're now ready for independent living. I mean, they're on their own. They've had the emergency shelter support. They've had the transitional housing support. And now they're ready to move on and be independent.
So this is probably not a real good parallel, but with people that have alcohol and substance abuse, a lot of the programs that are thought to be well managed, you'll take a person and put them in a place where they are basically not locked up, but they can't leave for 30 days, and so they get dried out. Then they might move into a 90-day facility where they're closely monitored, and then if they're making progress, then they'll go to another level where it sounds like there's some of the same ideas that you're talking about until they're ready to go out on their own. But how do you deal with issues where I'm sure you've got rules?
Yes.
And they more or less say, if you're going to provide this level of service, then you have to adhere to these set of rules. How do you deal with the issue where people disregard them?
Yes. So we do have rules. We're not, we don't have the same rules as shelter does because, like I said, they are on site. They're able to monitor that a little bit more. But we do have rules because we are still a program and we still need you to respect the rules in the home, and especially if you are living with other individuals that are not your family, out of respect for those roommates that you might have. So yes, we have rules, and that's part of the interview process. We really want to make sure and go over those rules to make sure that they know what they're signing up for and have an understanding. because you learn, of course, early on that everyone is not going to adhere or, understand that this is a great program for them and that they could possibly, be asked to leave our program if they don't follow those rules. So we learned early on.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Hi, this is Rantzberger from the Springfield Daily Citizen. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Corey Madison. And Corey, you and I made history here at the Daily Citizen.
That's right, Rance.
The first duo to have a double byline on a story.
For journalism people, or at least for this journalism person, that is the dorkiest, coolest thing. We each put in some work onto a story and get it in the best shape to put it out there into the world.
Teamwork makes good journalism, and our team certainly can't do our jobs without the help of subscribers like you, subscribers to the Springfield Daily Citizen. In Our Town listeners can get 15% off an annual subscription by going to sgfcitizen.org/town. That is 15% off an annual subscription at sgfcitizen.org/town.
And I'd like to point out that I think I was the first name on that double byline, the first one in history. You might have gotten the first billing on one that's followed.
That's all right. Second billing is still pretty good.
I remember I was interviewing a guy. It was actually just an ecumenical church in Washington, D.C. that worked with the people in substance abuse. The man who ran it was a priest. And I was talking to him about, do you kick this guy out when he starts drinking again? I couldn't get him to ever say that he kicked him out. He says they kicked themselves out.
That's good, yes,
And
true.
it was kind of a different focus, but I thought about that. Well, so your work and your dedication to this whole domestic violence, social ill, is more than just that. I mean, you're a big advocate. What does it take to break this cycle of domestic violence? I mean, if you were in charge of the thing, and how would you go about dealing with that issue?
Yes, for me personally, no one ever said anything. I mean, no one ever said, I think that when families are so familiar with it, it's just kind of what happens in relationships. So I look back and no one ever said, this is not okay. That even if that wouldn't have caused me to leave the relationship, I at least would have known that this is not how we behave in relationships and that, the abuse is not okay in any matter. And no one ever said that. And I think that sometimes in these cycles, when you see these generations and it just continues on, sometimes people just don't step up and say, this is not okay, that abuse is not okay. Those words are powerful to someone who is dealing with it because at least allows you to think that, well, maybe this is not what's happening in all relationships. And so that alone is powerful. And also just validating somebody and saying, after you say this is not okay, you've experienced this and what that looks like going forward and educating them on all the things that happen in that abuse and then also showing them on the other side those healthy relationships and those boundaries that you can put in place. And so at first is realizing what's actually happening, saying like this is not okay, and then taking those steps forward to just help them to break that cycle because if not, it will just continue on.
Are there certain common factors that you would find in a family abuse situation?
Yes, yep. Typically you see, like I said, the same type of abusers. You can kind of list some of the things that have happened. Everybody's situation is different, but...
Yeah. Are there certain triggers that seem to set it off?
No. I used to think that maybe alcohol is what, caused it or financial issues, and those might heighten the situation, but they're never a cause of it. And I thought that that was a cause. I thought that maybe if someone was under a substance or if they were drunk or there were some financial issues, that maybe was the cause of it. And I just had to learn that that's just not true. That doesn't cause someone to abuse you, whatever that looks like. It might heighten the situation. So I had to learn that. I mean, there are stressors in families that occur, but just because there are stressors there doesn't mean that every situation leads to abuse. And so I think that people can realize that. And if we teach more how to have healthy conflict, meaning a stressor comes up, whatever that looks like, we can deal with it in a healthy way and what that looks like. And that doesn't mean abuse. And so I think the education is key and kind of how we transformed the Rebound is now just not transitional housing. We really focus on education. So with our residents, and we also focus on prevention education in the community because we realize that a lot of people don't know how to have healthy relationships.
How often is there reconciliation in a family? If it gets bad enough that a spouse leaves with the kids, how often does some sort of therapy result in reunification? Is it rare?
Yes. It is, and I don't put anything past anybody. I mean, I believe that anybody can change if they want to, and we try to focus on that in our prevention education program. If you are being the abuser, and if you know if someone is being the abuser, to try to get them to get help, so that they can get the services that they need to kind of deal with those behaviors, because we don't want people walking around being abusers, but they need help to understand how to process those emotions and how to deal with them and not be abusive.
Do you think there's a relationship between gender equality and domestic violence?
Yes,
I mean,
can see.
if you see in a typical situation, you've got a husband who thinks that the women are subservient and he doesn't see a wife or partner in that way, is a situation like that more likely to result in domestic violence?
Yes and no. We see it in all relationships, not just, in that dynamic. We see it in all relationships. It is more, no matter, if it's in a friendship or relationship or husband and wife, whatever that looks like, it's really a power. It's just really whoever that individual is. It could be a female. It's just a person that is trying to gain power and control over another one. And it could be in that specific situation, it could be they might have been brought up to believe that. So if we're talking about maybe a husband and wife, they could have been brought up to say that your wife is to, respect and honor you and is at a lower, level.
More in a subservient.
Yes. And if she acts out of line, then this is how we deal with it. So if that's been in their family forever, then I could see that in that specific situation. But that is not all situations.
Well, again, we started off talking about how the word rebound has more than one meaning. Your husband, very successful basketball coach. I think he wasn't the youngest coach at one time in the country in college ball. And now we're talking about people rebounding from domestic violence, but of course we all know what a rebound is in basketball. And you two creative people have created a fundraiser around that idea. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's our Rebound Challenge. It is one of my favorite times. I mean, it is so cool to see not only players, understand now domestic violence and that they are helping a cause, but then also to see fans come together. So every year we pick a game, and during that game we tally up the rebounds and we get donors and sponsors to rebound or pledge an amount per rebound. So it's, like I said, it's just, we knew Dana came up with the name, the Rebound Foundation.
Oh, he did? Okay.
He did, so I have to give him credit for that. And we knew that was our platform, that was our way, that we knew that we were going to able to make this all happen. And we really wanted it to be something we both were passionate about and that we both can actually come together on. So it's so cool to see the two kind of merge during that game of our nonprofit and his profession come together. So, and that's how we raise a lot of our funds to continue.
And your money goes a lot farther than some places because, as I understand it, there's not any paid staff. It's just all volunteers.
It is. Yes, and that was what I wanted. I really, didn't know if it was going to work or happen, but I always envisioned, I do this for mission. I don't do this for any financial gain. So I really wanted it to be that. I really wanted our funding to go directly to the people that we service. And thankfully, we're still able to do that. I have an amazing board, and they just come in and they're like, what do we need to get done? And we've grown our volunteers. We've added on last year, our tip-off event is another, basketball-related event. So we added that on and just have had a great turnout our first year. So we've had some amazing donors and supporters of the vision, so we're able to continue.
So what's next on the horizon? What's your next goal?
Next goal, we are noticing that there's more of a need for our homes, especially here in Springfield. There's a lot of attention right now just on the homeless population. And we understand if you look at any statistics or numbers, a lot of individuals are homeless because of domestic violence. And so if you survey homeless people on the street, they will oftentimes say that it does cause you to be homeless, because if you rely on that person as your housing or your safe place and you have to leave, you typically leave with nothing. So we really want to help what that looks like. And so we're, looking at maybe another third home here in Springfield. As we've seen the need, unfortunately, we do still have to turn away some people that need that housing, and maybe shelters are full. I mean, it's an unfortunate situation, but we want to make sure that we're doing what we can. So,
I've heard kind of a debate around this next question, and I'd be interested in your take on it. Years ago, I was working on a weekly newspaper out in a rural county, and we never had reports of domestic violence through the sheriff's or police office. And I inquired about that, and there was sort of a culture, that's the family, and it's for us to stay, that's not our business. So you'd say, well, there's a reason there's a low reporting rate for domestic violence. Here in Springfield, in the last couple decades, the community said this is a real problem, and we need to highlight it, and we need to increase reporting and how we deal with it. And so on the one hand, you can say, look at the stats, look at the increased numbers and so forth. But I wonder to what extent it's better reporting and now an awareness of the issue, or is it really getting worse? Do you have a feeling about that?
I do. I think that it's twofold. I think Springfield, in particular, Greene County, has done a great job at trying to educate, police officers on training and how we respond to domestic violence calls, which are a lot, because that can be worse off for the victim if an officer shows up and has the idea what you stated of this is a family issue and they deal with it that way. That's very scary for a victim because they're like, I can't even rely on the police to come help me, so I'm stuck here. And so I think Springfield has done a good job of raising that awareness, and I think that my personal view is that we see higher numbers because I think that people feel more comfortable reporting here, which is a great thing. And even we see people from surrounding areas, not just Springfield. We have people come from all over to come to Springfield. One, because they might feel comfortable escaping, not in their area, but somewhere else. And also two, because we have Harmony House, which is a large shelter here in Missouri. And so I think that it's twofold. I think they feel very comfortable reporting. However, I still don't think that we still have all the accurate numbers because there are some that are still not able to come forward and report for whatever reason that might be. So I hope that answered the question, but I have different theories about reporting and numbers, especially here in Greene County, because I feel like we do have the services, especially for rural areas, to come here to Springfield and receive service.
Right. Well, we're about at the end of our time here today. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No.
Goodness.
That's
I
all
guess
right.
I was really right.
Yes, I know, it's right on. And no, just thank you for having me. I could talk all day long about domestic violence, but thank you for having me, and hopefully it raises some awareness to not only who we are as the Rebound Foundation, but also just domestic violence in general.
As I said, I did some research on what you're doing, and I was reminded about a Margaret Mead quote. I'm sure you've heard it. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
That's one of my favorite quotes. I mean, you hit the nail on it. I mean, it's my favorite. Yeah, I live by that.
That's great. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And let's go Bears.
Yes, go Bears. It's almost time.
That's it for this week, folks. Many thanks for listening. If you'd like to listen to other episodes, you can visit the Springfield Daily Citizen website at sgfcitizen.org/NRTown or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.